Good morning, good morning to you, you. Good morning, good morning to you. Good morning, good morning. Won't you share with a friend or two? Good morning. Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning to you, and many more, and many more, and many more. Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome, welcome, welcome. Pastor Ben, we're going to be doing our talk back on Facebook today. Good morning, and welcome to Daring Dialogues. I'm your host today, Shantae Charles. This is the Melanated Mic. This is Black Table Talk, also with our Facebook page by the same name for those of you who are following and watching on YouTube. A lot of you from YouTube have come over from my Facebook page. So I do want to say thank you for following us here also on YouTube. And then, YouTube listeners, if you also want to follow our Facebook page, Black Table Talk, if you're not following that, you really are missing out on daily content where we're talking about things that either are directly about Black people or things that will inevitably affect Black people. Now, I want to start out. I usually want to start out by reading our book selection. Our book selection for Mondays is Black AF History. But before I get into it, I got to address a couple of things because I am born and bred from the 305. And if you're not from the 305, if you're not from the 305, you may not realize that we like to call a thing what a thing is, and we like to address it up front so that there are no wonderings. Okay. So, in case you haven't noticed, I noticed because I'm a content creator. Content creation is not the only thing I do, but it does fall in line with my professional background as an artist, as an artist who creates. But all last week, I saw several of my friends. It wasn't just myself. I saw several of my friends in the content creation space having to address people coming into their space and assuming things about them without going to the page, without scrolling through the videos that have already been made, without reading the about section. Like, I don't know about other people, but if I like your page or I see a video that I like, I go to your page, I go see where your account has been created from, because we've had so many fake accounts and bot accounts and all that. I go to see where your account is located. That's number one. Then, number two, I go to your about section and I see if you have anything on your page about what your page is actually about. I mean, these are basics, but I guess it's not basic for everybody. And then, once I realize what your page is about, then I scroll through a couple of more videos to make sure that this is not just a one off, that I just like this one video from your page and everything else is trash, or everything else goes against things that I believe in, right? Because we know that broken clocks can be right twice a day. So this is something that I do. And I'm finding that a lot of content creators last week especially we're really having to combat some of the just ridiculous things and claims that are being said in their comment section. Now, I don't want to spend time on what comments are being made in my comment section. As a matter of fact, Meta is going to start cracking down on that. And if they see us hiding your comments multiple times or deleting your comments multiple times, you're going to find yourself locked out of some people's content spaces because the algorithm is going to notate that you're the person that's going around the internet making inappropriate and ridiculous comments in a lot of people's comment spaces. And so when you find yourself locked out and not being able to comment at all, that is what is going on because Meta has already told content creators that that's what they're going to do. Okay. And I did post about this to let people know what was going on. But here's the other piece. Once you know what a person's page is about, like my page, it clearly says in the name of my page who this page is mainly about. I don't want you to be confused. But once you know what a person's page is about and you scroll through and then you choose to remain in that space, it then becomes a little bit questionable about why are you remaining in that space and trying to force the content creator to say something or talk about something or be something that they've already indicated they are not. Okay. Now, of course, we know about the documentary that just came out about the person whose name I won't mention because I don't want the algorithm to pick that person's name up and then start sending me information about them. But I had somebody, um, because I said I wasn't going to talk about their documentary. Number one, because I am a survivor of several kinds of abuses. I've done interviews on them. You can find it on YouTube. I've talked about it here on my page. But obviously, people who don't follow me would not know that. Okay. So I did explain in the comments, I'm not going to be doing a review on this because of this reason. But then I had somebody come again and tell me, well, now that we're distracted about this thing that has nothing to do with our futures, can we focus on the current government administration, P 2025, 26, 27, 28, hashtag mass blackout, and how people are still spending with big retailers they were asked not to spend with? That's the real problem. No, the real problem is coming into other people's spaces and trying to dictate what they should talk about. Because don't you have your own space? I'm just saying. Don't you have your own space? And the reality is, again, if you have followed my page, you know that every week we are covering something to do with boycotting and what I call boycotting, which is actually more effective to not let small businesses, local businesses, Black owned businesses suffer, because only 2% of them, while you're doing boycotts of larger retail stores. So we cover that all the time. We also cover organizing offline. We also cover what white people can be doing in this moment to push back and resist against a tyrannical government. These are things that we literally are covering every week if you follow this page. So to come into my comments and to berate me and tell me what I should do when we're already doing it literally every week is kind of on the annoying side. And so I told this person, because again, I agree, I believe in addressing things directly with the person. I said, I appreciate your passion. I appreciate your passion for wanting people to stay informed, but you got the wrong audience because we are informed. We are not distracted. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. Mm-hmm. And we have been doing so since the inception of this page, which, by the way, was before 2020 and not in response or reaction to what America with three Ks has been doing. This was never a page that was built out of reaction to something. It was built out of a consciousness we already had. So, wrong page. Okay? Wrong page. Um, so yeah, this page was created out of conscious thought and conscious engagement and research and history and a love and a passion for who I am as a Black and Indigenous person living in America. That's what it was created out of. It was not created out of a reaction to what was happening in the news. Now, I know there are hundreds, maybe thousands of pages that were created as a response to 2020 and forward, but this is not one of those pages. All right. Just wanted to clear that up. My second thing I'm going to clear up before I get into this reading. As I said before, it is very evident who this page is about and who I am primarily talking to on this page. Now, if you're on Life Nation KC, if you're on my YouTube page, the audience is varied over there. But if you are on my Facebook page that literally says Black Table Talk, you should not be confused as to who I'm initially and primarily talking to. If you get something out of what I'm saying, great. I also have a page for everybody. It's called Daring Dialogues. That's my other Facebook page. That's where I talk to everybody. I do. But guess what? Everybody doesn't come over there. You know where they come? Black Table Talk. But literally, I created a page to talk to everybody. It's called Daring Dialogues. Go follow it. It needs followers too. It does. But I notice when I am posting or when I am talking specifically about Black issues, people have started to come into the comment section saying, it is difficult to be a person of color. And I read that and I say, okay, it is difficult to be a person of color. I don't disagree with you. But what is the topic? What is the topic here? What's the topic? So I let it slide the first time you do it. I will. I'll acknowledge, yes, it's difficult to be a person of color. The second time I see you do it, it's difficult to be a person of color. Now I'm gonna ask you, do you know what space you're in? Because see, I'm an educator. This is what we do. We give you the benefit of the doubt the first time. The second time, now I gotta ask you some questions. Do you know what space you're in? Yes? Yeah? Okay. You know what space you're in? Okay. Hide comment. You do it again on another post. It is difficult to be a person of color. Listen. Now I have to tell you the real nitty gritty. Now I have to go into detail about why we don't just say person of color in my space. Because there are people of color out there who will say, I Somalian, I know Black. I Dominican, I know Black. Okay? So that's why we focus on Black people here and not people of color. People of color have lots of pages for people of color. This is about Black people and the diaspora, the African diaspora, people who do not go around saying, I know Black. All right? So I just wanted to clear that up. Because if you keep writing people of color in my comments, what you're telling me is that you are trying to bypass the fact that there are some issues that are directly affecting Black people that are targeted at Black people and not just people of color. Okay? Cash Patel is a person of color. Cash Patel will be the first one to tell you, I know black. Okay? So we don't just say person of color here. All right? I hope I made myself plain because I don't want to have to come back. I don't want to have to come back and have this conversation. Now, let's get into Black AF history. Keyword black. This is Michael Harriet's book. Michael Harriet is, um, I think he's still a writer with Griot. I think he is, but he also has his own writing, Contraband Camp. I highly recommend that you subscribe to his specific writing page on Substack. And we are talking about, in his supplemental section, we are talking about before the first African Americans. And we started talking about Juan Garrido, um, and his service to the crown, and what happened at the end of his death. And so now we are talking, we're moving from his life into what happens after Garrido's death. All right, I'm going to read a little bit and then we're going to have some discussion. By the time Garrido died in 1550, other Africans, free and enslaved, had already made their mark on this new world. In 1521, a few months after Ponce de Leon died from thigh poisoning, conquistadors landed on the present-day South Carolina coastline. The Spanish crew completed a preliminary survey, but to prove that they had discovered new territory, they kidnapped 60 of the natives and brought them back to Hispaniola. Excited about the prospects of bling, Spanish bureaucrat Lucas Vasquez de Ayllon wrote to Spain and assured the crown that he wasn't as stupid as Ponce. He even took one of his captives back to Spain to testify that there was no danger at all in South Carolina. After exploring the coastline once more in 1525, Ayllon eventually returned to the shores of South Carolina on August 9, 1526. With him, he brought more than 600 passengers who were all ready to fulfill his new colonizing contract with Spain. Along with hopeful residents, supplies, and even livestock, Ayllon brought dozens of African enslaved persons. One reason Ayllon isn't known as one of the great explorers of his time is that he was actually terrible at exploring. He crashed the ship and lost most of his supplies on the first day. Then in November, the angry indigenous people joined the enslaved Africans and organized America's first enslaved revolt, setting fire to buildings in the settlements. This is before Bacon's Rebellion, by the way. Ayllon and his ragtag band of colonizers hopped back on their ships and jetted back to where the good, sane white people were, leaving everything behind. Of the 600 who arrived with Ayllon, only 150 made it back to safety. No one knows what happened to the enslaved Africans who revolted at San Miguel de Guabe. Only a few of them returned with Ayllon, and most historians assume that they assimilated in with the Native Americans in South Carolina. This is why some of y'all should get a real DNA test, not the ones for entertainment purposes. Several tribes in North and South Carolina, including the Lumbee, trace their heritage back to a mixture of indigenous people, whites, and African Americans. So when you hear Black people tell you that some of us have been here, we didn't come on or come during the transatlantic slave trade, stop looking at them crooked-eyed and sideways. Because some people know their history. Some people have their oral history passed down to them. This is why I don't argue with people when they say my family didn't come through the transatlantic slave trade, because some of them probably didn't come through the transatlantic slave trade. Okay? What we do know for sure is that both African and native populations had one thing in common, and that is resistance. Juan Garrido was not the only free black man on the North American continent. Another legendary African would prove to be more of an explorer than any of the handsome, rebellious black Americans who came before him. And while Garrido was never a permanent resident of Florida, Puerto Rico, or California, Mustafa Azammuri, who went by the street name Esteban, became a legend in places that wouldn't be called America for another 2 centuries. Not only did he explore more of the North American continent than Lewis or Clark, but he did it before most of the Jamestown settlers were even born. A couple of months after Alion's attempt failed, explorer Panfilio de Narvaez departed Spain with about 600 people who intended to establish a settlement in La Florida, a merry band of land bandits that included 450 troops and enslaved persons, along with wives, indentured servants, and navigators. Nearly 100 of Narvaez's men deserted the mission when they heard about Alion's disastrous experiment during a rest stop in Hispaniola. 60 more prospective colonizers died in a hurricane along the way. By the time Narvaez landed near present day St. Petersburg, he only had with him about 400 men. On April 13, 1528, after making his formal declaration, Narvaez ran into a group of coastal natives. Communicating through sign language, Narvaez explained that he was looking for gold. Oh, then you're looking for the Appalachee, they told him. They have plenty gold. Alvar Nunez Cabeza de Vaca, whose account of his adventures with Esteban forms most of the historical record, noticed that everything Narvaez told the indigenous tribe that he was looking for was followed by the revelation from the natives that the Appalachee had whatever he needed in droves. Narvaez was convinced he was going to go rob the Appalachee. That's also when the Carolina gentrifiers made a crucial mistake identifiable to anyone who has ever watched a horror movie or the documentary series about the crime scene investigation team led by Scooby Doo. They split up. Esteban knew that splitting up is the most ill advised move in all of history. It would later cause the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, and the destruction of the Five Heartbeats. And if you notice, this book does not contain a single chapter about Harriet Tubman telling passengers on the Underground Railroad, you go this way, I'll go that way. A dedicated student of history will learn that splitting up ranks somewhere between let's take their land and maybe I should put shoe polish on my face for the Halloween party in the top 5 whitest moves of all time. But because another member of the expedition enslaved him, Esteban stayed quiet, planning ahead. Cabeza de Vaca, on the other hand, tried to tell his boss that this was a bad idea. But on May 1st, Narvaez split his crew into 2 contingents. 100 sailed along the coast to find a suitable spot to set up shop, while 300 of his fighters marched through the unclaimed continent to separate the Appalachee from their gold. Along the way, they enslaved members of the tribes they encountered, stole their food, and plundered the Indian villages. The expeditionaries finally entered Appalachian territory on June 25th, immediately taking the women as hostages and enslaving the few men who were around. Narvaez settled down in his new territory and forced the female natives to make food for his men. But before looking for the gold, the new warlord made everyone else leave the village so the conquerors would have fewer mouths to feed, and then took care of his most pressing task, declaring that the land now belonged to Spain. As soon as he began reciting his Castilian declaration of claimsmanship, the Appalachian warriors rained down arrows that easily pierced the Europeans' good armor. The Spanish were under attack. For 3 weeks, the so called savages had the Christian warriors under siege, forcing them into desperation and starvation. Although wild game surrounded the village, the Spanish soldiers were so afraid that they couldn't even hunt. Meanwhile, Esteban was just chilling. He had no allegiance to the Spanish and was used to being hungry and terrified. So, after a month of arrow dodging, when the Spanish decided to make a break for it, Esteban grabbed his duffel bag and headed out too. As the conquistadors sprinted for the coast, the disgruntled natives chased them, killing every alabaster disaster they saw. Not only did the Spanish get their mollies whopped, but they also had to trudge through the Florida swamp hungry, goldless, and enduring a shower of arrows. Cabeza de Vaca and Narvaez eventually decided to retrace their steps in hopes that the Aut, or the Aute, one of the tribes they had enslaved on the way to Appalachia, would let bygones be bygones and offer shelter to the Spanish. But when they arrived at the Aute village, the Indians had burned their encampment to the ground and vanished. As it turned out, there was communication between tribes up and down the coast, warning of the fleeing conquerors. Oh, that wonderful telephone of communication. And all these tribes knew that if anyone could get rid of the Alabaster bandits, the Appalachian could. And the Appalachian did. They chased the Spanish to the Gulf of Mexico, surrounded them, and waited while the Spanish hid along the coast with dwindling provisions, no ships, and a few horses. This desperate, the Spanish decided to eat the horses, melt every piece of metal they owned, chop down some trees, and make rafts in hopes of escaping to anywhere. Good morning to those of you coming in. On September 22nd, Esteban's Spanish slave masters pushed five 33-foot long boats into the sea. Two of the surviving rafts landed in Texas, and for 4 years, Esteban watched his white enslaving army die off while he thrived. By 1532, only four of the original 600 were still alive: Esteban, Cabeza de Vaca, and two others. For the next 2 years, the four men traveled throughout Texas and Mexico and reached as far as New Mexico and Arizona. Ironically, Esteban proved his worth to his former enslavers by helping them escape after Texas natives repeatedly enslaved the colonizers during their 3,500-mile overland trek through present day Texas to New Spain, or what we know as Mexico. As an Arabic speaking African who traveled with Spanish speaking Christians, Esteban displayed a remarkable propensity for language and communication. He was able to learn sign language and interact with tribes throughout the Southwest and Mexico. For saving his Spanish travelers' lives numerous times, when they reached Mexico City, the Spanish rewarded Esteban with the whitest gift ever. He was re enslaved. When Esteban and his compadres arrived in Mexico City, they were greeted by Antonio de Mendoza Apacheco, a viceroy and close friend of King Carlos I of Spain. Entranced by Esteban's stories, Mendoza demanded that the African be sold to him and almost certainly introduced Esteban to his two famous conquistador buddies, Hernan Cortez and Juan Garrido. Although there is no written account of Esteban meeting the only free black man in New Spain, when Cortez heard of Esteban's travels, he begged the king's permission to go gold hunting in the western part of the continent. Carlos, however, had a better idea. After receiving letters from Viceroy Mendoza gushing about Esteban el Negro, he chose Esteban to lead an unarmed contingent of indigenous Mexicans to explore the territory north of Mexico City. Esteban, without the help of a single white man, led 100 Mexican Indians across the Sierra Madre, a feat that had been unsuccessfully attempted by every notable Spanish explorer on the continent. Along the way, Esteban seemed able to befriend every group of natives he encountered, even those who were initially hostile. Esteban supposedly met his death during his journey in 1539 at the hands of the Zuni, a tribe near the border of Arizona and New Mexico. Some non European scholars, however, believe he may have convinced the Zuni into helping him fake his death so he could finally be a free man. Regardless of what happened, Esteban would eventually be erased from American history. However, Native American tribes still share stories of the mysterious black skinned man who discovered more of America than Christopher Columbus, Ponce de Leon, and Leif Erikson combined. In fact, the elders who passed down the oral tradition of Pueblo Indians in New Mexico have a distinct way to describe their first encounter with European colonizers. The first white man our people saw was a black man. Let me just let y'all sit with that for a moment. All right, that was quite entertaining. But what it also shows us too is number one, there were lots of tribes already here in the Americas. Um, the other thing it shows us is that people were routinely enslaving each other, routinely. But nobody does the enslaving quite like the transatlantic slave trade, which will come along and provide and give us chattel enslavement. And what is the difference, you might ask? Well, chattel enslavement made people equivalent to furniture, farm animals, disregarding their actual humanity and in most cases their soul. Last section I'm going to read here is called The Real Wakanda. In 1324, Musa the First, the 10th Mansa or king of the West African Empire of Mali, began a 4,000-mile pilgrimage to Mecca. Before his Hajj, the African and the Muslim worlds had heard little about the emperor who united many parts of modern day Mauritania and Mali, and Europeans had no clue who he was. But after his trip, Mansa Musa literally put the kingdom of Mali on the map, and to this very day, historians universally consider him the wealthiest human being in all of human history. Born around 1280 as Kanga Musa, a name that refers to his mother, Kenku Hamadou, Musa was born into the matriarchal Mandinka society. Although his father was not a royal, Musa was appointed a deputy to the empire and assumed the throne in 1312 when the previous king took a pilgrimage to Mecca and did not return. While Europe was slowly emerging from the poverty, war, disease, and the Great Famine that killed everyone in 10 Europeans between 1315 and 1316, Musa was building universities, mosques, and city centers throughout the empire of Mali. Instead of conquering land through war, he expanded his empire through annexation as he used his control of gold and salt at disparate city states into one empire. It is said that by the end of his life, it would have taken an entire year to go from one end of Mali empire to the other. Because of this, Mansa earned more titles than LeBron James. He was called the Emir of Mel, Lord of the Mines of Wangara, Conqueror of Ghanata, Lion of Mali. The only titles he never earned were Best Rapper Alive, Mother of Dragons, and the hardest working man in show business. At its height, scholars say the kingdom had 400 densely populated cities in the Niger Delta. The University of Sankore in Timbuktu, Mali, still stands where he built it after conquering the area. Most accounts say that he took 60,000 men on his Hajj with him and balled out along the way, much to white people's dismay. Never one to be stingy with his money, by the way, Musa is reported to have handed out gold bars to the poor along his travel route. Almost every version of his Hajj tells the same story. King Musa handed out so much gold to the poor, it actually collapsed the entire gold market in the Middle East. Now, what would happen if America actually did right by poor people? But that's for a whole other conversation. So, what did he do to fix this? In perhaps the greatest money move ever made, the king borrowed all the gold his crew could carry from Cairo. Of course, he didn't need it, but the scarcity of the precious metal settled the market. Then, like the baller he was, he simply repaid the Egyptian moneylenders back plus interest. I'm sure he also included a note that said, "My bad, I'm not used to hanging out with broke people." When he returned to Mali, Musa brought back some of Spain's and Egypt's most prized architects and builders, creating an even wealthier kingdom. Historians say that by the time he returned from Mecca, he controlled most of the gold and salt in the Mediterranean. Coincidentally, this is when the Kingdom of Mali began showing up in the European maps. How and when Mansa Musa died is a topic of fierce debate, but in our extensive research, we could not determine whether Mansa Musa released his tax returns or not. It's just so wonderful to read from Michael Harriet's comedic telling of Black history. We encourage you to get the book. He is both factual and entertaining at the same time. Again, the book is Black AF History, The Unwhitewashed Story of America by the Michael Harriet. Check out his Substack as well, which is called Contraband. Contraband. All right. So let's chop it up. Who's got some questions about today's reading? Did you know about all of those people? Did you know about the Spanish exploration in detail of the Americas? I know most of the time I'm from Florida originally, so we learned a little bit about Ponce de Leon and some of the other ones as a part of Florida history. But I don't know a whole lot of people who are going around saying, yeah, I knew what the Spanish were doing over in Florida. I knew that there were Black explorers along with them. I knew about what was happening on the coast for South Carolina and North Carolina. Um, and I think Michael Harriet does a good job of summarizing a lot of um, broader information. He also does a good job of footnotes. So that's also one thing that I like about him. He does footnotes. He also does end notes. And he also gives you some homework at the back of his book. Every section ends with a sort of a quiz. So he wants to make sure that you're actually keeping up with um, the information. So he does extensive end notes. So you're wanting to look at the specific sources that he's pulling from, whether it's articles or books. They are also located in the back of his book. Data and facts and receipts. All right. So I'm going to bring you on, Ben, and hopefully you'll be able to come on without a problem. If you are watching by YouTube, I want to thank you for your time and attention. If you want to join us for the talk back, make your way over to our Facebook page, Black Table Talk. Thank you for your time and attention today, and I hope you'll join us again on tomorrow. We will be back and we'll be talking about inspiration and motivation. Take care. All right, good morning. Can you hear me and see me?
Good morning. I can hear you and see.
Great. I can hear you and I cannot see you. But that's fine. As long as
I
you
look
can
the same.
as long as you can do both, that's great.